what happened a couple meetings ago. And I never remember which the things were.
I am hearing you testing the microphone over the live stream, if that's helpful.
Yes.
Okay, I think we might have that resolved.
Okay, Amanda, you said, I'm sorry, Councilor Bakay, you said you're on the live stream at the moment?
Yeah, and I just heard myself. It's about 20 seconds behind, but there's sound coming through, and I'm on my phone, so I can hear it.
Okay.
All right.
We will, in that case, proceed.
Okay. If we're ready to go, then Mr. Blakinger, if I could have you just sort of take it from the top on that one.
Okay.
Mr. Blakinger, are there others that should be joining the meeting with your presentation?
Well, Tim Horstman, who is bond counsel, is on if there's any questions, but that's all.
All right.
Stay 6 feet away from all the people, and so you want to wear your mask to keep you safe.
Okay.
And to keep
YouTube in the background.
everybody around you safe.
Patrick, I think that's you.
That's how easy it is.
The mayor, Bernie, you're gonna have to mute her.
Seeing your masks out and about downtown.
It's somebody auto playing a YouTube video from the city's YouTube account. So if anybody has that in the background,
You know, you can decorate the account. And just want to make sure that they're
I'm going to try to talk over that, but that might be challenging.
No.
cotton masks. And
Well,
that's all.
please.
Hey, Lancaster,
Be able to
keep your mask.
everyone and
There's live stream.
if anyone has YouTube playing, it might have stopped. Okay.
Okay.
Ready?
I represent the Lancaster Higher Education Authority, an authority created by the city many years ago to provide financing for institutions of higher education. It has provided financing in the past to F&M, Pennsylvania College of Art and Design, and HAC, and this project is for Thaddeus Stevens College of Technology. When I say provide financing, it does not have money in loans. It is a conduit financer, which means it issues the loan, the notes, and gets involved in the middle of the transaction, but a bank or sometimes bondholders invest. But in any case, it's a bank loan. In this case, it'll be a bank loan. And the authority needs to be involved in order for the loan to qualify for tax exempt status under the Internal Revenue Code. So that's the whole purpose. The statute that created the authority requires that the municipality who created the authority pass a resolution stating that this project is for the good of the health, safety, and welfare of the community. So that's the resolution that I assume has been circulated to all of you that you have before you. This happens to be a $10 million project, which is the maximum amount you can do for this kind of financing. And it does describe the project as being acquisition, construction, renovation, improvement of the college's Orange Street campus, acquiring some land and additional dormitory rooms and offices, and various other capital projects, as well as financing the costs of the transaction. So that is what the project involves. And you've had this come before you every time there's a municipal authority. This doesn't apply to like certain other kinds of authorities don't have to come to you like Lancaster Industrial Development Authority. That law is different and doesn't require this kind of resolution. But this authority has done projects for, as I mentioned, other institutions in the past, many for F&M and several for the others. So I'd be happy to answer questions. There's no city taxpayer dollars involved. Approving this does not put any money at risk for the city, at all at risk for the city. Quite honestly, it doesn't put anything at risk for the authority. Not that the authority really has much, but it doesn't, everything is covered by the institution involved, and the authority and its officers are fully indemnified by, in this case, Thaddeus Stevens College.
Thank you, Mr. Blankinger. Are there any questions from other members of the Finance Committee? From the council as a whole? And from the members of the public, I guess we should pause at this point to allow for any comment on this particular resolution. And while we do that, I'll thank you again, Mr. Blankinger, for explaining and talking us through this particular authorization and what it means. Great. Mr. Harris, is there anything coming in on the phone?
No, Ms. Baker, there is not.
Thank you very much. Then I would like to make a motion to move this to our full council meeting, which will be, if I'm looking at my calendar correctly, Tuesday, June 14th.
July.
July 14th.
Second?
I have a vote. Is there a second? I'm sorry.
It has to be from your committee though, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So moved. I think Pete is seconding.
Thank you. Yeah,
Sorry, I had it on mute.
that's no problem. I figured so that was the case. Thank you. Thank you very much. So then I do have another item on the agenda this evening for Finance Committee. That is Administration Resolution number 35, 2020. It has to do with amending our water fund capital improvement plan. And Mr. Hopkins, you're here this evening to talk to us more about that.
Yes, so thank you, Councilor Baquet. So this resolution number 35 is really just modifying the budget for the South Tank project. When the project was originally approved on the 2018 bond issue project list, it had a total budgeted amount of $9.5 million. And what we're doing here is actually taking, moving funds from two of the projects, one which is the large diameter transmission main project, and also dollars from the automatic meter read project. Both of those are coming in under what the budgets that were originally set at council for. In case of the large diameter main project, we're actually taking some dollars away from a contingency fund that we set aside. Now that we're partway through that project, we feel that we can move those dollars. So what we're doing is moving about $2.1 million from the large diameter main project, and also moving $2 million from the AMR project, the automatic meter read project, and putting those dollars to the South Tank project. The South Tank project would now have a total budget of $11,350,966. And that project, we feel good with that budget because that project has been bid out. The bid has been approved. We have a dollars in there for the engineering and the construction management for that project, as well as I believe it's an 8% contingency for the project. So that project is ready to move forward. We have all of the approvals that are required through Lancaster Township, which is where the South Tank project will be located off of Millersville Pike. And we've actually established the escrow that's required at Lancaster Township. So we are, for all intents and purposes, ready to go with this project. We just need to now have the budget set at what the total amount of the project is anticipated to be.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions or comments from members of this committee? And rest of council? I will pause briefly for any comments from members of the public on this particular resolution. And while I do that, thank you, Mr. Hopkins. And hearing none, Mr. Harris, then? Okay.
No calls.
On this hot topic. Okay. Therefore, I will make a motion to also move this resolution to our meeting on July 14th.
Second.
Thank you. And with that, that concludes my committee, Mr. President. Thank you.
Mr. Harris, did we have a vote there? Do we need one?
It was an approval by the committee, right?
Right, okay, sorry. I must have zoned out, it's fine. Great. So everybody forgive me for not being entirely with it at the moment. We now move into the Community Planning Committee. Councilor Craig, are you with us?
On the agenda, the first item on the agenda is Resolution 34, recognizing Sheila Master-Pietro for her service to the community. Council President Ishmael Smith-Waddell.
Yeah, I will take this. Thank you, Councilor Craig. So as many of you have heard, Sheila Master-Pietro, Director of Church World Services, is retiring this year. And she and Church World Service have been before this council a number of times, looking for our support, not to bolster or augment themselves in any way, but to augment our community and the new Americans that they support through that organization. Thousands of refugees have been resettled in Lancaster County, and we have developed, as we all know, an international reputation for this thing. I'm not a big fan of the great person theory of history, but certainly Sheila is responsible for a good deal of that. And so with her retirement, it only seemed fitting that council pass a resolution honoring her work. That's kind of the long and short of it.
Thank you, President Waddell. Are there any questions from the committee?
I don't have a question, Councilor Craig, but I do have a comment. My first job out of college was actually working at Church World Service under Sheila, and really I can credit a lot of the community work that I do to my time at Church World Service, and so I'm extremely appreciative of all the work that she's done to really allow our community to be the welcoming community that it is. I agree with Council President that it's not on the hands of one person, but certainly she's been a pillar from the very beginning in developing this culture of welcoming, particularly refugees. And I think that we would be a completely different community if it wasn't for the work of Church World Service.
Thank you. Are there any further comments or questions from the committee? Hearing none, I make a motion. We move this to full council on July 14th.
Second.
Thank you very much. We will move on then to Administration Bill number 6, authorizing rezoning of a site at North Queen Street, West Frederick, and North Prince Street. I think Douglas Smith should be here with us to present.
Yes, can you all hear me okay?
I can, Douglas, go ahead.
Thank you, Councilor Craig. Pleasure to be here tonight. Good to see you all too. I thought I'd first contextualize this zoning petition and provide a little bit of background on the project. So this is concerning the former YMCA site on North Queen Street and some adjacent parcels. As you might recall, the YMCA ceased to operate in 2009, has been owned by LGH since then. And that site was cleared and demolished of its historic building in 2017, and has since, most of that area has functioned as a temporary green space for the public in order to avoid it just being an empty grass lot. So the petition has been submitted to by LGH and Hankin to rezone that area and adjacent sites, which will be detailed by them a little bit more later on. Per the Pennsylvania Municipalities Planning Code, which I think you're all getting familiar with each time that I see you, the planning agency is to provide a recommendation to council for action along with comments. Mr. Harris, I believe, has provided that memo to you, which I wrote at the approval of the Planning Commission. The memo outlines the review for consistency with various community plans, including Places 2040, which is the common plan, Building on Strength, the city's economic development plan, Growing Together, which is our intermunicipal plan, and our city comprehensive plan, which is from 1993. So with that review, I've provided all of those letters of consistency to you, which were issued by Lancaster County Planning Commission and Lancaster City Alliance and city staff. The Planning Commission did vote to unanimously approve or recommend for approval the rezoning as submitted. And with that, I'm happy to answer any further questions around the process up to this point or afterwards. But I believe LGH and Hankin will be providing more detail on the project itself.
So, Douglas, this is a procedure that's done for the new projects, but it's basically been done over and over, and it's just to reiterate that it needs to be updated. So,
sorry, let me clarify that this is a zoning map amendment that's being requested. So right. Zoning, contains both the text and the land use map. And in this case, it's the land use map that's being asked for an amendment. And it would be changing mostly from hospital complex to mixed use. There are a couple parcels that are high density residential R4 that will also become mixed use as well.
And right, thank you.
Has been taken on this other than the Planning Commission recommendation.
Great. Are there further questions from the committee?
I have a question. Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but are there any, I'm sorry, may I, Ms. Craig?
Yes, go ahead.
Maybe I'm getting ahead of myself, but are there any future plans for the site? I saw some mentions of potential uses, but is there a developer in place? And what are the future plans for the site?
Yes, I will have to punt to LGH and Hankin, and they will be providing more details to answer the question. Thank you, Councilor.
Further questions from the committee?
Councilor Craig, so is LGH doing a presentation today, is what you're saying, Douglas, or no?
Yes, there are representatives from LGH and Hankin Group here, and they're ready to screen share, I believe, as well, and they have a presentation ready to walk you through the petition. So I just wanted to help provide a little context in terms of the city process before we hand it over to them for more details.
Thank you.
The only other comment is where UPMC stands, it's a very similar situation where we are looking at rezoning hospital use to mixed use. When is that supposed to come before us? Because we haven't had that come before us yet.
Councilor Craig, may I take that one?
You can, go ahead.
Thank you. That's a good question, Councilor Garcia Molina. That process ostensibly is spooling up, and the involved parties are starting by engaging members of the community planning committee first, and then we may see something on the agenda either next month or the month after that. But I have not had any hard confirmation on proposed dates as of yet.
So, President Waddell, Councilor President Waddell, let me add to that Councilor Arroyo and Councilor Molina should be expecting an email with further information concerning that in the very, very near future.
Great, thank you, Councilor Diaz. Councilor Craig.
Absolutely.
And Councilor Craig, this is Chris, just to chime in. Wanted to confirm that you'll probably be hearing from me just in the next couple days about the UPMC site, and we can handle that separately. But I appreciate the ask. I know that one has been in limbo for some time, so looking forward to giving you an update.
Thank you. So let's move forward. And Douglas, you said there was presenters.
Yes, Neil, are you with us? And is Brian Burgess also in the room?
Douglas, it's John Lyons here at Lancaster General. Yes, Neil Fisher is on, and we're waiting to get Brian Burgess in the queue. Bernie, I don't know if there's, he's waiting there. There he is. He'll be happy to talk more about this opportunity. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak.
Are you anticipating others?
Those are the two, Bernie,
Okay.
Fisher and Mr. Burgess. The question I had, I guess, and Brian Burgess, do you have, are you able to, will you need the slides for this evening to be shared on the screen?
I will, yes.
Okay. So Neil, if you have that, that might be something too, or Douglas, if you have that,
I believe Neil put that presentation together, although if need be, we can email quickly.
Nope, I can share my screen. Neil, Mr. Fisher will be able to share his screen just a little bit while Brian is speaking as well. So why don't we try that?
Great.
I'm going to push the technology to its limit, see what happens.
Perfect.
Brian, the time's yours.
Great, thank you very much. My name is Brian Burgess. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Lancaster General, and I appreciate the opportunity to present tonight about this project we have planned. So if you could advance the next slide. So the site we're talking about is the site of the former Lancaster YMCA, which sits across Queen Street from Lancaster General's employee parking garage. And we purchased that back in 2004 as a potential area of growth for the campus writ large, and a potential way for us to continue to expand healthcare services in the community. Earlier on, we invested in some property cleanup. We actually took down the old Y located around the corner, and we put in some service parking for the community as well as a little bit of a park. So on the next slide. So what we're thinking now is to continue to invest in the city and well-being and to redevelop that piece of property in order to continue to improve the neighborhood in that part of the city, and to recognizing the need that we have demand for housing within Lancaster, that housing is tight, and additional need for healthcare services. And so when we were thinking about what was potentially going to go into that site, we recognized that it sat outside of our sort of traditional wheelhouse of provision of healthcare services. And so we really wanted to pull in a regional developer to help us revitalize that site and work with a developer to help bring that vision along. And so on the next slide, we looked at an RFP, we looked at a number of different groups, and we felt that the Hankin Group was the one that best represented our vision for developing not only residences in that area, but also to tie it back to our healthcare mission. Hankin, we had the opportunity to tour a couple of their developments in in Chester County, and they've gotten numerous awards for quality design, innovation, sustainability. And they're currently on board with us doing the pre-development work in preparation for developing, and then ultimately they will develop both the residential and retail components as well as medical office space for us. One thing about Hankin that isn't on the slide that I would like to mention is that was attractive to us as Lancaster General. So we've been in the community for 125 years and obviously are very interested in sustaining that mission in the future. Hankin as a developer tends to build and retain in their portfolio projects that they've developed. And so we were interested in the fact that they are not a developer that typically flips their properties, but that we felt we were getting into a long-term relationship and partnership with somebody who would remain committed to the community.
And good evening. My name is Mike Davis from Barley Snyder, and my part of the presentation will focus on the legal justification and appropriateness of the requested rezoning. Basically, we're going to be focusing on the fact that there is a great deal of consistency in terms of this rezoning request with existing city and county land planning documents. And you'll see that it is a logical extension of the MU district to extend it to this property as it promotes a knitting together and a strengthening of the surrounding neighborhood. And Neil, if you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide. This slide ends up showing the current zoning for the site. And if you will notice the red dotted line, that actually outlines the property that is the subject to this rezoning request. And you'll note that the majority of it is that bluish purplish color. That is the HC district, the hospital complex district. So you can see the vast majority of the property that is the subject of the request is in the HC district. The properties consist of basically 8 properties. All 8 properties are currently owned by LGH or an LGH related entity. The total property subject to the rezoning request is approximately 3.5 acres. You're probably familiar with the site in terms of existing uses. It's a temporary park with open space and parking. There's also a child care center with supporting parking, which is the Owl Hill Learning Center, and then some unoccupied commercial space with apartments on the upper floors. If you look at the request, like I indicated, the majority of the site is zoned HC. The other 2 properties that are part of this are zoned R4. Primary uses in the hospital complex district are very limited, and they focus on hospital-specific primary uses. Stated differently, there are no permitted residential uses in the HC district. So you can see that that ends up being very restrictive in terms of the opportunities to redevelop the site. And looking at the current zoning slide, please note that basically as it currently exists, if you look to the west and portions to the south of the property, you can already see that the mixed use district is there. And that's part of the reason why we think this is a very logical extension of the mixed use district. And Neil, if you wouldn't mind going to the next slide. Here you can actually see what I just referenced in terms of the logical extension. If you look at the red dotted line outlining the footprint of the property to be rezoned, you can see that it meshes in very nicely with the existing zoning that surrounds a significant portion of the property. Again, one of the reasons why we think it really makes sense. And by allowing the site to be mixed use, it really permits and facilitates a mix of residential, commercial, and institutional uses to be developed on the site. So you'd have uses that would be supportive of LGH's existing operations, like medical offices or administrative offices, but you'd also have uses that are supportive of the existing neighborhood, like commercial uses and additional housing and apartments. I would point out that the definition of MU district specifically provides that the MU district includes undeveloped land where new mixed-use residential and non-residential development with traditional neighborhood character is recommended. And basically that is exactly what LGH and Hankin will look to do on the site if the mixed-use zoning is permitted to be placed here. As was noted in the letter that was submitted to City Council by the City Planning Commission, this particular mixed-use request is very consistent and in fact supports all of the city and the county's land planning documents. And I'll just briefly go over, those particular items. As Douglas indicated, the city's comprehensive plan, this rezoning request is consistent with that in that it supports mixed-use development of retail, service, and other commercial uses within neighborhoods, and it encourages job creation through allowing flexible development sensitive to the needs of business. And this project will do that. In terms of the building on strength, the City of Lancaster's Economic Development Strategy Plan, it specifically ended up noting that for the development of the 400 through 800 blocks of North Queen Street, that they should consider additional restaurant and retail uses to build on what currently exists on the 300 block, and to also allow this to support employees and visitors to LGH, and basically to extend the Queen Street commercial area from downtown out to the train station. For this particular site, which is the subject of the rezoning request, Building on Strength noted that basically we should work with LGH to encourage restaurant and retail uses on the lower levels of any new infill development and create a vibrant, walkable, mixed-use designation. And that's exactly what this ends up doing. Also, with regard to growing together, the comprehensive plan for central Lancaster County, that specifically notes on its future land use map that this property should be designated as mixed use and institutional. So again, the mixed use request is consistent with the Growing Together initiative. And then last, Places 2040, the county's comprehensive plan, basically there, this use is also consistent with that document as it creates a mix of uses and it provides a greater supply and diversity of housing types to own and to rent. And because of all this consistency with these various planning documents, that's the reason why the County Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of this rezoning request. And we believe it's also the reason why the City Planning Commission unanimously recommended approval of this rezoning request. Last, I just want to end up noting that on all projects that LGH does, it always tries to work closely with its neighbors and to make its neighbors aware of what it intends to do and to answer any questions that they have relative to those plans before the plans are even initiated. And in this instance, prior to the County Planning Commission meeting and the City Planning Commission meeting, LGH reached out to its neighbors to make them aware of this request and offered to answer any questions that they might have. In fact, John Lyons was especially involved there in making sure that basically hangers were placed on doors to make folks aware of this request. Only one neighbor contacted LGH in response to this notice, and that inquiry did not end up indicating an objection to the rezoning, but instead was an inquiry regarding the nature of how the site will ultimately be developed, and in particular it was a question with regard to a setback issue. And clearly those specifics are not yet finalized and would be subject to separate public meetings and hearings regarding the land development specific to the site. So that is an overview, obviously, of what we intend to do and why we think the rezoning really makes sense here. I would just note that in addition to the letter that you received from the city staff on behalf of the City Planning Commission, there were also other documents attached to that indicating that the Lancaster City Alliance and obviously the Lancaster County Planning Commission both are supportive of this application. And with that, we do have members, other members of LGH here that are available to answer questions, as well as Neil Fisher from the Hankin Group. So we'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much. I do not have any questions at the moment, but there's a possibility that there might be questions from the committee.
I have a couple questions, Councilor Craig, if I may.
Go right ahead.
Mr. Lyons, just for clarity, maybe I missed this. LGH was 10 minutes in LGH was to remain the owner of Hankin after this rezoning. Hankin is just developing on the land. Is that how this is going to work?
Brian Burgess can also answer this. Excuse me, I'm wearing a mask because I'm so close to Mr. Davis. Our intention is as the properties involved in this project then would be sold to the Hankin Group for development, if approved.
Thank you. And with the intention of potential housing on this land, do you guys have an idea of how many units will be proposed, or yeah, how many units?
Mr. Fisher, go ahead and answer that as well. We're still at a very early stage of the planning process at this point. Neil's also working to figure out how to unmute his computer.
Councilor Arroyo, are they unmuting?
Yeah, I would also note that, yeah, we will, as we move along in the land development process and move forward in that, the more details as to the size of the project itself, number of units, and the footprint of buildings that would go and services that would go on that property would be outlined at that point.
Great. Those are all the questions I had. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I do have one question. In the process of the project, will the footprint and the planning include any affordable housing? Hello?
Sorry, Councilwoman, Neil was trying to get his computer to work. He's going to come on.
Oh, okay.
Banking group. We're going to fly off one laptop. Hold on just a second.
Thank you.
Hey, good evening. Neil Fisher with the Hankin Group. Sorry about that. I couldn't get.
Thank you.
Once I started sharing, I couldn't get back to the point where I could actually see my tools. So the question regarding affordable housing, I would say as a company, the Hankin Group, we are very supportive of affordable housing. We've built several affordable housing projects, and there are tools and mechanisms in order to be able to do that. And typically what you do is there are programs with PHFA. I guess I should first say it depends on the level of affordability that you're looking for. Some of the projects that we've done, we've worked with PHFA. They became partners through a tax credit program. We're actually applying for a project right now in the borough of Phoenixville, where the borough of Phoenixville is supplying the land. And then we submitted the application to PHFA, and we'll build the project if we're awarded here in August. And so in general, I'd say we are supportive of affordable housing. It is difficult to bring affordable housing into new construction simply because the cost of construction is so high versus the rents that you're looking to achieve. And so that's why they say there are programs in place for that. So as far as for this project, if there are programs that are in place with the city, we're happy to explore it as we go through the development process.
Okay. Are there any further questions from the committee?
I do have one question, Councilor Craig. So one of the two of the parcels are used as a child care center. How will this be affected by that?
So we've been working with folks at Outhill Daycare, and they are moving to the Liberty Street project, the Liberty Place location. I believe Alex Garrett thinks that they're going to be in by September, October timeframe. They've already notified their parents as well as the staff that works there that they are moving, and they're actually very excited about the opportunity to move into a new location.
Great. That was my only question at this time, Councilor Craig. Thank you.
Thank you. I suppose we should wait to see if there's questions from the public.
I have a question though, Faith.
Go ahead.
If you were to begin the construction, what are the hours and the length of time that this project will be completed?
Some additional thoughts is when construction starts, we'll continue to build relationships with and maintain communication with our neighbors. And we've done something similar with other development projects at the main hospital facility on Duke Street. One of the things that I typically do is to leave my cell phone and email address to neighbors all around, and then they'll end up calling me with questions and concerns, or sometimes words of praise, depending on the development. And we'll do the same thing here. Working with Hankin, we'll make sure that we first adhere to all city ordinances relative to construction and timing of construction as well. And then two, we'll work with our neighbors as it relates to mitigating any impact, negative impact, as best we can along the construction schedule.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there any further questions from the committee? I mean, from council as a whole?
Yes, Councilor Craig, I do have a question. And perhaps, Douglas, you could just provide this context. I have a question about, so this was purchased originally in 2004. When did this particular area become zoned HC? Was it prior to that purchase or was it after that purchase?
Sure, I'd be happy to answer that question, Councilor Kay. So my understanding of the timeline is that LGH purchased in 2004, YMCA stopped operating in 2009. Somewhere around that time, the hospital complex district was actually created, and these parcels were not rezoned until 2012. Okay. And they went from R4 to hospital complex district at that time.
Thank you.
Sure.
I also have a follow-up question. If I understand correctly, the property will not be sold unless it's rezoned. Am I understanding that correctly?
The property will be continued to be owned by Lancaster General if it is not rezoned. That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions from council?
I do have one more question, Councilor Craig. Does LGH have any intentions to expand within city limits in the near future?
Yes, we would like to continue to our footprint, not just there, but throughout the other locations in the city. As demand for our services increase, we'll continue to invest in the city.
Is there a reason why this site wouldn't be optimal for you, for you all to use that property for future intentions of expansion?
No, our intent would be to also provide, to work with Hank and to also provide medical services on the property. Good question.
Thank you.
That's why it was so important for us to select a partner in this project that would do it right, because we wish to be a neighbor to that project, but then also to a participant in the project as well.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the public? We'll give them a minute. Do we have anything, Bernie?
We do not.
We'll give them a few more seconds and then we'll move on. Okay, hearing nothing, we will move on. I'm going to motion to have this moved to full council on July 14th.
A second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you so much. We will move on to the next item on the agenda, which is Administration Resolution Bill number 31, Sewage Planning Module for the Warehouse District project. And I believe Douglas is here with us again, if he didn't run away.
Yes, I'm here again, and I'm sorry to bother you with another sewer planning module request. As I went over at previous council meetings, these are rather perfunctory approval. It is a requirement that's recently imposed on us by the DEP because of our consent decree. For several years, they were issuing waivers of having to go through this sewer module planning. And they revoked that waiver back in November of 2019. So we have several of these requests before council this evening. And these have all been reviewed by our water engineers and sewer engineers who have provided the necessary documentation for this module to get to this point before council. I review these, I help to fill them out, and Mr. Harris helps to complete the approval portion of it after this goes to a full council meeting. So technically this is an amendment to our sewer plan, our sewage plan. And it's because all of these projects are increasing capacity into our combined system. There is ample capacity for all of these projects to move forward. So that's the general context that I'll just provide for all of these sewage planning module projects. The first one at the site of, the warehouse district. So this is the former Snavely and Dosh lumber yard at the corner of Charlotte and West James, I think also known as 351 West James. There are multiple buildings on this site, and they've submitted this request with the anticipation that it'll be a mix of offices and restaurants. So that's about all the background I have. There's no other land development planning or anything else that has been submitted to zoning or any other boards or commissions that I'm
Douglas, are there any other land development things that go along with the other two?
Sure, I can speak about them briefly as well. Would that be helpful?
So, pardon me, Council President Waddell, would it be possible for us to take all three of these together?
Mr. Harris, is there any reason that we can't do that?
No, there's no reason why you couldn't.
Then I would in fact suggest that.
Thank you. Okay, continue, Douglas, go ahead.
Sure, so the second project, Administration Resolution number 32, 2020, for 4 to 8 West King Street. You might have seen a newspaper article on this last week. The Planning Commission just reviewed this land development plan, and it is a adaptive reuse of the former L&P buildings that the newspaper vacated and transitioned to Zamias, who also redeveloped the Candy Factory building, as well as Steeple View Lofts and 101 and Q. That project has been approved conditionally. There's no additional building footprint on that. It is, and it will be a residential and office mixed-use project. About 45 residential units with some office on the second floor, and the commercial spaces on the first floor will be retained, including the bakery and the bar. And 3 new commercial spaces will also be added on the ground floor. So from the Planning Bureau's perspective, this is a really wonderful opportunity to add more housing density downtown. And they're at the point where everything has basically been approved by the city except for this sewer planning and the eventual build for interior construction.
Wonderful.
Any questions on that before I move on to the next one?
Are there any questions from the committee?
Okay. 661 South Marshall Street is the third planning module. This is resolution number 36. Thaddeus Stevens is looking to build a duplex on this site. It'll be a subdivision final plan, so they'll divide the parcel in half. This parcel is at the corner of South Marshall and Schuylkill. So if you're on Chesapeake near the school and you go down south just 1 block on South Marshall, and Schuylkill is there, right at that corner is where this duplex will go. There are a number of vacant lots in that neighborhood, so it's great that we're seeing some infill there. And the Thaddeus Stevens students will be helping to build these houses. I haven't received any other zoning or land development requests, but I've been in conversation with their development team over the last 6 months or so, and I'm expecting a submission very soon.
Thank you, Douglas. I have no questions in this regard. Are there any questions from the committee?
No, Counselor.
Are there any questions from the council? Hearing none, we'll wait a little bit for the public to speak. Do we have anything, Bernie?
We do not.
Thank you. Since there is no public speaking, make a motion to move all three of these resolutions to full council, resolution 31, 32, and 36, sewage planning modules, to full council on July 14th.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you so much. We have one other item on the agenda, which is resolution number 33, authorizing participation in a municipal assistance program. And I think this is Douglas also.
Councilor Craig, this is Chris. I'm going to jump in on.
Hi, Chris.
Hi there. This is our last one. I know we've had a long list of community planning items tonight. I believe this will probably be a short one, but happy to answer any questions that you may have. As noted in the proposed resolution, with your approval at council, we'll be seeking a grant for the comprehensive plan from the state municipal assistance program that's based out of the Department of Community and Economic Development. We're seeking a grant of $200,000 based upon our interaction with staff at DCED. You don't always get the full amount that you ask for. Sometimes you get a portion of that amount. We're going for the whole shebang and hoping we'll get 200,000. The last piece that I will note is that as part of the application, not only is a council resolution required to support, but we also have to provide a match through our budget. So we would be providing a match of $200,000, and it's important to note here that it's not new money that the council would be agreeing to. Essentially, 100,000 of the 200,000 match would be based upon salaries that we already pay to our staff in the Planning Bureau and in my department, and the other $100,000 would already be part of my professional services budget. So essentially, we are asking for your agreement to utilize those funds, the city funds, as a match, and then to request the 200,000 from the state as well.
Thank you, Chris. Are there any questions from the committee?
No, I'm just excited for us to have a comprehensive plan.
Let's have a comprehensive plan.
Yes.
Are there any questions from the rest of council? Hearing none, we'll wait a few seconds for the public. Nothing, Bernie?
Nothing.
Okay. Nothing being heard. Make a motion that we move this to full council on July 14th.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you so much, and that concludes community planning for this evening.
Thank you, Councilor Craig. We then move to the Public Works Committee. Councilor Soto.
Thank you, Council President. The Public Works Committee will now come to order. We have 3 items on the agenda this evening. Administration Resolution number 37, 2020, an application to the PennVest loan. Resolution number 38, 2020, authorizing reimbursement agreement for funding to the water project. And Administration Bill number 7, 2020, establishing licensing regulations for operation of outdoor retail business in public right-of-ways. I believe Mr. Campbell's going to be speaking to these items.
Yes, in fact, I have with me Chris Hilditch, who is the division director for the utilities for DPW City of Lancaster. Both of the first resolutions are related to each other, but they are different ends of the same set of requirements. The first one being an application to, or the resolution asking for authorization for the administration to execute a financial assistance application on behalf of the city to PennVest, which is the Pennsylvania Infrastructure Investment Authority, for water infrastructure improvements, which include the following projects: emergency power upgrade for the Conestoga and Susquehanna water treatment plants, and the South Tank transmission mains and Millersville Pike main replacement. Chris, would you like to be able to add anything further to the request? This is basically asking for us to be authorized to make that application to PennVest.
And Mr. Campbell, how much would that application be for?
It will be in the amount of $10,550,000, which is the larger part of the amount that had been in the earlier resolution from Patrick's request. It basically includes all of the capital costs for these projects, but not the contingency.
And again, Mr. Campbell, this is a brand new application for PennVest, correct? This is not tied to anything else.
That is correct.
Thank you. Is there any questions from the committee?
Chris, did you want to be able to add anything?
Hello, council members. This is Chris Hilditch, and I just wanted to add that our emergency power project is a result of a regulation that the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection passed, and by August of 2021, so next year, we have to have emergency power at both of our water plants. The other project was part of our capital improvement program, the transmission mains and the Millersville Pike mains. We are just seeking to look at some PennVest funding for that, since that project was approved by council but not funded in the 2018 bond funds.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you.
We'll start with number 37. Is there any questions from the public? We'll give it a minute or so. Anything, Bernie?
Nothing.
Okay, at this time, I'd like to make a resolution to move resolution number 37 to full council on the 14th of July.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, now we move on to resolution, aye. I'll move on to resolution number 38.
So this resolution is in order to make that project work properly and to get it started so that we fulfill the deadline that Deputy Director Hilditch had mentioned. We need to be utilizing general operating funds to start that emergency power upgrade for Conestoga and Susquehanna water treatment plants. And this resolution is a declaration of official intent to reimburse the general operating funds used for that purpose for these projects with the funds received from the PennVest loan. Chris or Patrick, did you want to be able to add anything further to that?
Sure, I'll jump in. Thanks, Steve. So essentially what we're doing here is this, Penvest requires this type of a resolution to be in place if we want to begin the projects prior to actually receiving the funding from the Penvest loan, assuming that we are approved for the loan. From the time that we get an approval from Penvest for the projects themselves to when we actually go through the ordinance process with City Council and then would close on a loan can be several months. And the concept here is that with this approval of this resolution, we get what is called a letter of no prejudice, which essentially means that from the time that we're approved for the Penvest project, that the Penvest projects are approved, we can begin spending our own dollars. And then when we get the Penvest loan funds, we can repay ourselves with those Penvest dollars. Without this letter of no prejudice, we would either have to wait until we have the Penvest dollars in hand or spend our own dollars first and not be reimbursed with those Penvest dollars when they come in. And we did something very similar to this when you approved the Penvest financing for some sewer projects. We also did a letter of no prejudice at that point. That was actually about this time last year. And that's all I have.
Are there any questions from the committee? Are there any questions from the rest of council?
I do have one question, Counselor.
Please.
So in reading through the resolution that was proposed, it says up to the maximum principal amount of the $10.5 million. Does that mean that we're asking for the maximum amount, but we're not necessarily sure that it's going to cost that much? We're just anticipating it?
So the number in the resolution is what the anticipated cost of the project, although as Steve said, not including contingency. The borrowing itself would, this is not approving the borrowing. So this is having the authority, your authority to just take the application to Penvest. Assuming they approve that application, all of this then comes back through City Council in a borrowing that is functionally similar to if we were going out for a bond issue, except that we're borrowing dollars from Penvest versus going out on the open market to issue bonds. So there's a whole nother process that would go through for the borrowing itself. This resolution with this letter of no prejudice, I mean, the way it is worded would essentially allow us to spend $10.5 million of water fund operating dollars prior to receiving the Penvest dollars.
Got it.
Functionally, that's not how it would work, right? We would probably be, we would go partway into the project before we would get the Penvest financing completed and do a closing and actually receive those loan dollars. But this gives the full authority up to the full amount of the anticipated loan.
Great, I appreciate the clarification. It makes total sense now.
No problem.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions from the council?
I do have a
question.
No. Go right ahead.
I'm sorry. I heard you people, who's on, Janice?
Janet.
Councilor Diaz's, go right ahead.
Patrick, do we know if this, by chance, the project could go up due to the circumstances and the market, that it would actually cost more than the 10.5?
So and I'll ask Chris to chime in here also, but there are two separate projects. So the one is the emergency generators project, which I believe is anticipated to be about $5.5 million. And then the rest of it is the Millersville Mains project. This is a circumstance where we haven't actually bid out this work yet. So yes, it's theoretically possible that we would end up with bid numbers that are higher than what's anticipated, but I think, and Chris can correct me if I'm wrong here, we have recent engineering estimates that with other projects have come in close to what the anticipated or what the actual bids are. And we rely often on those engineering estimates for
whether we'll see bids higher, I expect with some issues with people working, we'll see bids that are lower. But Penvest has the ability to adjust our loan once we have actual bids. So that's something that we'll be able to address as part of the Penvest process. They understand that at any given time, bids can go up or go down, and they have the ability within their regulations to increase the size of our loan if absolutely necessary.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, that was one of the other things I should have mentioned is that the part of the it's not a delay, but part of the process from when Penvest approves an application until the closing is that we have to have permitting in place. We have to have bids in hand, accepted bids. So we will know before that closing on a loan whether or not these estimates are accurate. And if the bids end up higher, we do have some of that flexibility with Penvest to go for a higher amount because of the actual bid costs.
And we've already done the study in regards to all the work that that's required.
Yes,
Mr. Campbell?
Yes, we have. That is correct. And in fact, the documents that will be going out to bid are a result of having done all of that study work so that we have a coordinated set of documents and specifications.
So therefore, we won't be spending any money for any more studies?
Not for this particular part, these particular parts of the work. That is correct.
Okay, thank you. That's all.
Thank you. I just wanted to know if there's any world in which we submit the application for this funding from Penvest and it doesn't get approved.
I don't believe so, but Chris and Patrick have more experience with this in Pennsylvania. I'm still new to this here.
I don't think we can say this is an absolute 100% guarantee. I can tell you that we've been on multiple phone calls with Penvest, about these projects, but about other projects also. And we're in a place right now where Penvest has a significant amount of funding available, primarily through federal sources, and they have worked with us pretty closely on, on having financing in place. And one of the benefits of the Penvest financing is that our experience with it is that it has been at a lower rate than what we could get on the open bond market. And that's one of the reasons that we're pursuing this funding source versus going out for an additional bond issue.
That makes sense. But primarily my question was about the federal end of things, so thank you.
And thank you, Councilor Becker. Any more questions from the rest of council? At this time, I'd like to open up if there's any questions from the public. Bernie? Give us a minute or two and let me know.
Okay.
Okay, hearing none, let's like to make a motion to move resolution number 38 to full council on July 14th.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Now we move to Administration Bill number 7, establishing license and regulations for operation of the outdoor retail businesses in the public right of ways. And I believe this is a follow-up to what we passed last month, correct?
Yes, that is very correct. And hopefully we're looking at it as a follow-up to a very successful program for the opening of the streets for outdoor dining. As you see, there are more than 20 different restaurants that have outdoor dining that are utilizing some of the public right-of-way. And you'll see that there are many more than those using the public right-of-way that are exercising outdoor dining. Now that we are in phase green, we wanted to try to make the same types of opportunities available to retailers. The previous ordinance was limited just to restaurants and the disbursement of food and beverage. this would allow retailers to be able to occupy sidewalk space and be able to sell their wares in the public right of way as well. The regulations are very similar to those of the restaurant and outdoor dining. Specific passages need to remain clear, 6 feet passage. There's certain distances surrounding fire hydrants or handicapped accessibility ramps, etc. And the same types of provisions where if your retail establishment wanted to extend beyond the frontage of your own facility, you would need to include a letter of support from the adjacent property owner. But in all other ways, it's exactly the same as that for the outdoor dining and the restaurant use, but just for the retail.
And just a follow-up on that, I believe this is only for the downtown investment district, or is this going citywide?
This would be going citywide for any area that we have a public right of way. So this would allow us, frankly, to look at certain communities where we are exploring a different level of engagement and be able to continue some of our public participation outreach in many of our neighborhoods and communities while we explore the potential for further development elsewhere.
Now, will there be any regulations as far as time expiration on this? Because I believe the other one's only good to the
end of December.
December. So will this also include a time limit?
This would end at the same date, at the end of December for 2020, so that both outdoor public right-of-way opportunities would end at the same time.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Campbell. Are there any questions from the committee? Are there any questions from the rest of City Council?
I have a question, Councilor Soto.
Yes,
Mr. Campbell, when we discussed this about expanding to restaurants, there had been several restaurants that had been already starting the process of gaining these approvals provisionally, because it was obviously something that was very needed. And I'm wondering, has this come from retailers that are asking about this? Do we have a similar process in place? What does that look like now?
It's very much a similar process in place. There has been some requests, but it has not, I will admit, it has not been as great a demand as the retailers had. But we did want to provide the same type of an opportunity because many businesses are still struggling in very much the same way. And we're hopeful that with the success of the outdoor dining ordinance and regulation, that there are more people coming to downtown, and many of the other retailers may be interested in being able to make their wares available in a similar manner.
Thank you.
I also have a question, Councilor.
Please.
Is there a limit to the number of licenses that will be issued to businesses?
No, there is not. I mean, one would be given one license for your particular property or for your particular establishment, but we're not limiting the number of licenses or permits that can be issued in the city of Lancaster.
And I did read that if a business is to establish kind of selling their products not directly in front of their property, that they would be able to do so with the permission of wherever they're doing so. And because a lot of businesses and retailers are like micro business owners at the moment, would a business be allowed to set up in public spaces that are owned by the city, or does it need to necessarily be in front of a establishment?
That is a very good question. The regulations do allow us to consider exactly those situations, but we are looking at it as on a case-by-case basis. Okay. So one would submit the application, and similar to the last process, our inspectors would accompany the property owner to the site to see what it is that they're actually proposing.
Okay. Has there been anyone that's been denied for the sidewalk ordinance? For the cafe?
For the cafes? Not to my knowledge. There have been 2 or 3 cases where they have elected to utilize only their own property and not go into the public right of way. And there have been cases where they have asked for, say, 8 tables, and we were only able to authorize 4 or 6 based on making sure that you've had the right social distancing, etc. But I'm not aware that anyone has been denied. It may be the case that one has been, but I'm not aware that anyone has been denied.
Great, thank you, Mr. Campbell. That's it for me, Councilor.
Any other questions from council? At this time, I'd like to open this up to the public. Again, hopefully somebody will call in. Question, if not, we'll give it a minute or so. Mr. Harris. Nothing, correct, Bernie?
We've had no calls, Mr. Sarah.
Okay. This time I will go ahead and make a to move this forward to July 14th. I even got my date wrong. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have it. Mr. President, Council President, that concludes Public Works Committee.
Thank you, Councilor Soto. I appreciate that. I think that just leaves us with was that a call, Mr. Harris?
It was not, no.
Okay. I believe that just leaves us with the clerk's report. So, Mr. Harris, the floor is yours.
Yes, Mr. President. So as you've seen, I've submitted this to you in writing, but some of the highlights. I wrote the council resolution regarding the removal of the Christopher Columbus statue that was adopted at the June 23rd meeting. I wrote the cover letters for that also. I wrote the resolution that you reviewed this evening regarding recognizing Sheila Mastro Petro 4 years service to the community. In response to a public donation request from an individual at Columbia University, I prepared a spreadsheet of city council members from 1990 to present. Statements of financial interest, I continue to request those. I've received most of those at this point. Lancaster Parking Authority, I attended the in-person meeting, which they held on the 25th, and prepared a summary of that, which I sent to you. Virtual meetings, I received a Zoom account, and I have, with Mr. Hopkins' help, I have helped to run this meeting and the previous meeting. Some miscellaneous items. I received printed updates of the city code. I updated the code book in my office, which, if you're not familiar with, is some 5 inches thick. And I sent out additions with the printed updates to the magisterial district justices who continue to use a printed edition. I registered 1 counselor for the Municipal League's Virtual Sustainability Conference. And for the council president, I prepared a summary of police reports to council from 2017 to the present. And also prepared a short introduction to City Council and Lancaster City Government.
It's been a busy month for you, Mr. Harris, and as always, we thank you for your service and your diligence. Okay, I believe that's the last item on the agenda, so if nothing is burning a hole in anyone's heart or pocket, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
I do have one question. I have a statement that's saying,
okay.
The 4th of July, of course, was very eventful all over the city. And as I was driving up from North Charlotte Street toward Manor Shopping Center area, there was fireworks right along the street. And of course, it was very surprising that a police officer passed by and didn't stop. It was very disconcerting because it was if you are familiar with that road, it's very, very small area there. And some of the fireworks that we're using, I could tell that would be very detrimental, and someone can literally catch on fire. There was children out in the street. I know that the mayor has addressed this, but we do need to make sure that if there is an issue like that, that the officers do stop and try to let them know that it's illegal, because I just don't want any more fires or anyone catching on fire. So I just wanted to address that.
Thank you, Councilor Diaz. And as members of the Public Safety Committee, I know, if I'm remembering right off the top of my head, I know that Councilors Bekay and Garcia Molina are putting their heads together for what we can do more as a council and as a city, knowing that we already have an ordinance. One obvious thing that any of us with state level reach can do, and I know that this conversation is being had, is cut some of this off at the source. This volume of fireworks and these kinds of fireworks were not always available for sale within the city of Pennsylvania. And I think looking at the fire damage and the incidents that we've seen around the state just over the past weekend, I think it's simply not worth the tax revenue that the state is getting. And as a matter of fact, our fire response and whatnot costs them absolutely nothing. So thank you for raising that, Councilor Diaz. Any other council questions or comments? Okay, in that case, I'll hear a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a good evening.
God bless everyone. Be safe.